What's up, Heartbreak Nation? This is Coach Luke coming to you live from Heartbreak, Chicago. We have a very special guest coming on today. Excited to welcome Jared Ward in here in a minute. We have dope questions lined up. So we'll give everyone a second to log in. We'll give Jared a minute to log in here. But we're really excited. Jared is an all-around great dude in addition to tons of great accolades. Some of our favorites, first American in last year's New York City Marathon. Let's see, 8th in Boston that year. Tons of great stuff. So, all right, let's see if we can get Jared in here.
Yo,
What's up, Jared? How are you?
just living the dream. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Loving the hat, by the way.
Thank you. I love this hat too. All-time favorite.
There we go. There we go. Well, also, thanks again for hopping in with us. Super pumped to be able to chat with you. While everyone's logging in, I know most of us know you, but kind of run through a quick bio here. So tons of stuff. This list is so long. Father, Olympian, professor, Saucony sponsored pro, first American in last year's New York City, which was 6th overall, 8th in Boston earlier that year, 2016 Rio Olympics where you finished 6th. So tons to talk about. You got a whole list. This is great. So first off, thanks again for joining us. First question for you. Since we're a little short on Olympic glory right now, going back to Rio in 2016, you finished 6th overall. Galen, fellow American, finished 3rd. That was really strong showing for U.S. distance running. Talk me through that race. Kind of tell me a little bit about that day, kind of how everything unfolded.
Yeah, it was a special day and an experience for me too. I mean that day started early in the morning with me leaving the Olympic Village with our whole training staff and the support staff that was going to be handing us bottles and things like that. And I was the only one that stayed at the village. And so Meb and Galen were both getting to the start line on their own. And I showed up to the start, started getting ready to warm up. Meb showed up, and then I warmed up with Meb. And to me, I looked up to Meb as a U.S. marathoner for years, and so just to be warming up with him as his teammate at the Olympics was pretty cool. And then Galen shows up and had a few words with Galen, and then I continued warming up with Meb, and he gave me advice. He was telling me when the race was going to go and where to be patient and things like that. And it's just in so many ways, it was just really an experience right from the get-go. But the things that stood out in the race to me was, first of all, was the pack. Like, we were running about 5-minute pace for the first half marathon, and there were like 50 people in that pack. And I'd run 5-minute pace before, and I'd run in a pack of 50 people before, but I'd never run 5-minute pace in a pack of 50 people. And it kind of felt like to me, what it seems like watching like cyclists race, where you're just in a pack and you're just flying and you just trust that the road's going to be there in front of you because you can't see your feet and there's so many people in there. And that's what it felt like. I was just staring at the guy in front of me running, and I didn't know what I was going to step on because I couldn't see the ground. And we'd go around a corner and the pack would like bungee out and then kind of slap back together. And it was just it was an experience that way. Aid stations were crazy. But it's interesting too, though. Like I think while some of the experiences were fun, the takeaways were really things that I learned through the experience. And what I learned in that race was that I could make it through something that was hard. And at like mile 15, 16, Eliud Kipchoge takes off. He eventually wins the race. A bunch of people went with him, and I started thinking, oh no, I actually don't feel that good. It's hot and humid. And at that point in the race, I didn't know if I started thinking, am I going to be able to finish, or what happens if I don't finish? And the negative thoughts came in. My legs were heavy. My stomach didn't feel good. And then it hit me really hard that I didn't know if I could make it to the finish line, but I knew I could make it to my next water bottle. So I just focused on that. And then I met up with Callum Hawkins, and Callum and I ran next to each other for a little bit. And I thought, you know what, I don't know if I can make it to the next finish line, but I can run with Callum to my next water bottle. And so that's what I did. And then, and then it was like, I don't know if I can make it to the finish, but I can catch that guy. And it just became this very much run the mile that I was in. And Ryan Hall wrote a book titled Run the Mile That You're In. I think that's an incredible marathon running mantra. But it kind of worked for me. And I got to the finish line excited that I finished in the top 10 because that was my goal. But I think I was more excited because 10 miles ago, I didn't even know if I was going to finish. And I really overcame something in the race. And so that race really means something to me because I did something I didn't know I could do. And I don't know, it was fun in that way. The media made fun of me for being the most excited sixth place finisher they'd ever seen. It was fun to hang out with Meb and with Galen just a little bit after the race. And the opening and closing ceremonies were fun. I saw what seemed like every event from basketball to diving to tennis and cycling and rugby. Like I went to a lot of events. I just had a really, really fun time in Rio.
That's awesome. I love that. Just your thoughts of like warming up with Meb. It's like you belong there just as much as he does, but because we've all looked up to him for so long, did you catch yourself like he did a certain stretch and you're like, oh, I should do that too?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think I'm like a logical thinker, right? And I'm like, I should do the same thing I'm doing every time, but I'm like, it's like I'm almost taking notes. I'm gonna have to go back and look at that or consider why Meb does that. And for sure, like, I'm like, well, Meb's back on the table getting work done. Should I get something work done? I think, no, I don't think so. I think I should just, but totally do the same thing.
That's awesome. And then, I love the analogy of like, kind of starting off how it started off so fast, it felt like you were bunched in like cyclists, running with that many people for so fast. Kind of, did you feel like that pushed you to run faster than your race plan might have otherwise have been, or were you kind of,
yeah, I would say that it was really right on the pace that I was ready for. So it was almost like the pack chose my pace, which was good for me.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think it pulled me too much. Coach Icestone always gives me a range, and so we have kind of a target pace, and then there's a range where if the pack is going a little bit faster or a little bit slower, I'm just going to run with the pack. But then once the pack gets outside of that range, then I have to decide. Okay, if it's too fast, I got to slow down and just run my pace. If it's too slow, am I going to jump out in front and run my pace, or am I just going to be patient for a few more miles? And so it's almost like a sliding scale. We move from green to yellow to red, and
Yep.
And that's, so there's a range. But I would say at the Olympics, man, they were pretty much running the pace that I wanted. So
That's
it
awesome.
worked out well.
Yeah, I love that flexibility though. So we were in Atlanta cheering for you in February. Talk me through that race a little bit. And then obviously world has kind of dramatically shifted since then. So talk me through kind of what you've been up to since.
Dude, yeah, that was a tough race, and I've thought more and more that our highs and lows in life probably have a lot more to do with the rift between expectations and reality as opposed to just what reality really is. And I think that's part of what made the 2016 trials so sweet is that I really didn't expect to make the team. I thought I could and I had a chance, but I didn't go into that race expecting to make the team. And this last year in Atlanta, this last trials in Atlanta, I really went in expecting to make that team. And I just didn't have a great race. And I think for a while, I just didn't want to think about it. So I pushed the race way far back in my mind. I actually went on a cruise with my family right after the race. I'm glad we didn't get quarantined on that ship. But I got home, just spent some time just really not thinking about it. And then I started trying to digest it. Why didn't it go how I wanted? Was it something that I did wrong in training or racing, or was it mental? Was it physical? Like, just trying to break it apart. And I'm sure it had, it was multi-dimensional. But mostly I was just kicking myself. Like, while I was breaking it apart and regretting different aspects, I was really just kicking myself for not having made the team. Not like there was something that I did wrong. It was just that I didn't make it. And it was on a call with Des Linden, actually, that she said, I normally give myself 48 hours to like cry about it. And then I say, it's time to get over it. And so like, her subtle advice to me was get over it. And, it was amazing that really helped. I thought, you know what I do? I need to get over it. I need to look forward to something else. And I think that helped me to stop being hard on myself and to consider that just like any other race in life that didn't go as planned, it's time to set some new goals and continue to working towards them. And to not ever put too much stock into one race. And so I think that kind of helped. And I'm grateful for the experiences I had in Rio. I now take making that team a little bit less for granted, and I'm grateful for those experiences. I'm pretty excited for the team that we selected this year. Like Jake Riley has been a friend and competitor of mine for a long time, and he's had a really rough last 3 or 4 years in personal life. And so I'm pretty happy for him and what this marathon meant to him in terms of overcoming. Pretty happy for Abdi in making history.
Yeah.
The black cactus.
Is still out there,
alive and well.
Yeah.
He's, this is the only dude that you look at walking around and think, man, this guy can't even walk. But yet he can run. And so I'm pretty happy for Abdi, and I'm happy for Galen. Galen, there's for every bit of controversy that there is around Galen, he's a family man. He has worked really hard through his career, and he was a medalist at the last Olympics. And so for America to have someone in the race that has gone there and brought home hardware before, that's exciting. It's exciting for America. And so I'm pretty happy for the team we have. And I'm hopeful that I'm still running and alive in 4 or 5 years, and I'll try for another one.
I mean, I think if you look at the longevity of Meb and Abdi, it just purely proves the fact that, the Olympics are not just one cycle for runners anymore. There's so much future ahead of us.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it gives me a little bit of, it helps with long-term perspective, because I think we train and compete differently when we're looking at the short term as opposed to when we're looking at the long term. And I've come home from this marathon with really a long-term perspective. I took a big chunk of time off. I took about 2 or 3 weeks off because my foot was bugging me a little bit, and I was going to jump back into other races, and then everything canceled. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to really be patient with this. I went and saw a doctor on my foot. He said, well, I think it's probably fine, but you could take a couple more weeks off. And so I just took a couple more weeks off. Been spending time in my home gym in here, on my exercise bike, which is over here. And just like doing some of those things, but not really worrying about running. And, I'm back to 50, 60 miles a week now, but I'm taking it patient. And I'm really making the focus about some of the little things that I think are going to keep me healthy, and thinking more like Med thinks and more like Abdi thinks and Legat. Every time I talked to these guys when I was young, they would say, Jared, be patient. I can hear Med just texting me, be patient. I can hear what it sounds like when he texts me. And I can hear Bernard Legat's voice in my head saying, be patient. And I can hear Abdi saying, man, what you got to hurry for? I can just hear him saying, slow down.
Yeah.
And like that, early in my professional running career, honestly, when I would hear be patient, I would think, yeah, maybe that's for you, but I got to go pound this pavement if I'm going to be good. I got to go do it right now, and I got to be all in. And I think maybe that's a part of growth, and maybe we all have to go through that, and maybe it's a part of every developing athlete. But I think, the years have taught me the value of what these guys are saying at being consistent. Patient doesn't mean not working hard. Patient just means waiting for fitness to come and doing the things every single day that's going to let that come. Patience has when Med says be patient, he's also saying be consistent. He's not saying just go home and rest. He's saying be consistent day in, day out, and wait for it to come. And I think there's a message that these guys can share, or that they are sharing, in patience and consistency.
So, and I think that's a great transition. So kind of, as a professional athlete during quarantine, kind of talk me through a little bit of like, maybe like a typical week of like what you might do. Is it very flexible? Or are you kind of picking and choosing based on the day, or do you still, within that consistency, try to keep a very solid routine?
So it has been really flexible for the first couple months of this experience. And I think part of that was recovering from Atlanta and coming off of a really, I still believe that going into Atlanta, I was the fittest I had ever been. Training was really, really good. And so I put a lot of pounding on my legs getting ready for that race and then the race. And so for the first little bit, it was a physical and emotional recovery. And I would get up in the morning, I'd spend time with my kids, and I would get downstairs and get on my exercise bike at some point during the day. But it was just it was a flexible day, and it wasn't at the forefront of my mind. And as I've gotten, as I'm transitioning back into training, and I'm training at, probably 50 or 60% right now, now it's becoming a little bit more regular again. I get up in the morning, I'm going to be doing some sort of exercise, whether it's downstairs in my basement or whether I'm going outside. And so I've been spending a lot of time down here, and as quarantine restrictions have been loosening in Utah, we're now in a yellow phase where they're saying groups of 50 or less. And so Utah really is, I think, less strapped than a lot of other places right now. But we're pretty, so I'm getting back outside now a little bit, and getting back to what seems like a bit of a routine. Now I haven't seen Coach. I haven't worked out with Coach since Atlanta. I've done very little with training partners. I met him on a trail once last week. So I haven't done a lot that way, but I'm starting to get back to a rhythm. And I think it's different for everyone. The athletes that Des and I coach with Team Endure Strong, we coach everyone a little different depending on what they need. And I think some people right now really need a break. They've been racing and racing and racing. And now to have the calendar cleared and be able to hit the reset button is a blessing. Some people were really getting ready to race, and then quarantine messed it up. And so they needed some sort of high intensity training program that they could time trial racing. For some people, we said, hey, you've been running marathons for a long time, let's do some speed. And so for some of these guys, we did a time trial a few weeks ago. Now they've been doing a VO2 max kind of speed training to get ready for a 5K or 10K. And in about a week and a half, they're going to time trial again. And we'll see how much improvement some of these athletes have. And so I think everyone's a little bit different. And, I would advocate to anyone to look at what they need and what's exciting, and then go and chase it. But to be proactive, it doesn't mean that you have to be training at 100% in your basement right now. Mm-hmm. But I would say that to be mentally proactive at doing the things that are going to help set you up in the fall, while the intersection of those things and what you're excited about right now is going to pay off in the long run, and it's going to pay off mentally, that you just didn't have a total lapse. And I think it's never too late to kind of grab the reins again and get back after it.
That's awesome. And I think just so applicable to just not even just running, but just so much of life right now. But how about you? What, any plans for fall after that? What are you kind of looking forward to next?
There's a lot of major marathons this fall now. Yeah. And so I'm hopeful that these marathons go off and that I have a chance to hop in a marathon this fall. And there's there's 5 great options and a lot of other good options now. And so I think, as we get a little bit closer to fall, hopefully we have a little bit better idea of if these races can take off, or if
Yep.
some of them are and some of them aren't, and try to get a handle. But I would love to be in a marathon this fall. I've had fantastic experiences in Boston. I've had a number in New York. I really love the New York course, and I think I'm starting to get a handle on it. Chicago was my first marathon, and I love the Chicago Marathon. I still think back on that one as one of my favorites. And so, man, there's now so many options this fall. I just hope that that things are under control and that these races can go off.
Fall is for majors. Let's go.
That's right. That's right.
So the occasion for our conversation this morning is really around the launch of the Endorphin Pro, which I know you were heavily involved in the development of that shoe. Can you just talk to me a little bit about the shoe, about your involvement in it, kind of what that shoe means to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun. Honestly, this has been probably the biggest intersection between my stats, research, academic world, and the running world for me, working on these shoes. It started back right before the 2018 New York Marathon. I got a call from Spencer White, who's the developer at Saucony, and he said, "Hey, I have some new shoes for you." And I said, "What are these, like plated shoes, fast marathon shoes?" And he said, "Yeah, they're fast. We think." And it was like a week before the New York City Marathon. He said, "If we send you these, would you be interested? You don't have to race in them, but we'd be interested in your feedback. And if you want to race in them, that's great." And I said, "Yeah, I'll check them out." And so he sends them to me. I get these shoes probably 6 days before the New York City Marathon. I talk with Coach, and normally I do 3 or 4 by mile at marathon pace the week of a marathon. Just one last effort to kind of test the pace. And I had got 3 different shoes from Saucony. And I decided I was going to do 4 by mile, and I was going to do 1 mile in each of those shoes, and then 1 mile in the Kinvara, which is what I was going to race in. And we did it on the treadmill at BYU. I hooked up a mask to my face to measure oxygen uptake, so like a VO2 max test, kind of, but not maximal effort. And we just measured energy cost, how much oxygen my body demanded in these shoes. And 2 of the shoes were very similar to the Kinvara, and 1 of the shoes was 4.4% better. And so, and even before we calculated the number, I stepped out the treadmill and I said, Doc's my training partner here and researcher, Ian Hunter. And I said, "Doc, those are the shoes." And he said, "Well, maybe, let's look at the numbers." And we looked at the numbers, and sure enough. And so I emailed Spencer White back and I said, "Hey, I'm going to wear these shoes. And I think we should call them the 4.4 percenters." But they didn't call them that, obviously, but these first ones have Ward on the side. And so I said, "Well, if you don't call them the 4.4 percenters, you should call them the Wards." And he said, "Maybe if you run fast enough in New York." I guess I didn't. But they worked really well. I remember, I went into the 2018 New York Marathon having pulled my hamstring twice that year. The second time was in September. And so I actually had called David Monty up 6 weeks before the New York Marathon and said, "Hey, I haven't been able to run for the last 4 weeks. I think I got to pull out." And David said, "Jared, I encourage you to just come and run. We're happy to support you. And even if you only make it halfway, we're happy with that. Just come and try." And so I was kind of like, well, there's nothing to lose. I'm going to go run. And I'm going to go to New York. And then I had these new shoes, and I was like, well, there's nothing to lose. I'm going to wear the new shoes, And I ended up finishing 6th, and I ran a great race. I really felt like these shoes made a difference on the downhill. On the uphill, that early prototype honestly felt a little heavy. It was heavier than what I was used to racing in. But on the downhill, I felt so free to run my pace that I was very excited about these shoes. And then over the course of the next year, I probably got 20 more prototypes, and it was the same protocol. I would test them on the treadmill. I would give feedback to Saucony in terms of which ones were the best, what I liked about them. Doc and I even flew out to Boston before the Boston Marathon in 2019 and talked about shoes and some of our ideas, and Saucony shared some of their ideas, and we created some more prototypes. And I ran in a revised prototype for the Boston Marathon in 2019. and then a few more prototypes into the 2019 New York City Marathon, where we were at this final version of the shoe, and I ran in the Endorphin Pro as it's releasing next month for the 2019 New York Marathon, and loved it. And you know, the shoe got lighter, the shape got better. I really think that you know, one of the things, and we've been testing plates at BYU and a variety of different carbon fiber plates. And what we've learned from the plates is that it's probably really more about the foam than it is about the plate. I think the carbon fiber plate gives the shoe enough rigidity that you can use really low density foams. And these low density foams, I think, help our body not have to eccentric load as much every step. We can kind of just throw our leg out there and let the shoe take the impact, as opposed to having to take the impact in our quads. And so I think that the foam is a big aspect of these new shoes in general, but I think Saucony has a really, really impressive foam. So I think the big thing about the Endorphin Pro is the foam. This foam is more resilient, and it's very low density, so it's light. It's going to last. It's going to last a lot longer than other shoes in its class. Okay, you hear stories about these new shoes, you know, where you race a marathon in them and you don't ever want to run in them again. That's not the case with these Endorphin Pros. They're going to last races and races. The second big thing about these shoes, I think, is the shape. One thing that I've noticed with this new Endorphin Pro is that when I get running, it's hard for me to sit back in what I used to feel like was a marathon cadence and posture. They're just a little bit more assertive. The curvature puts you a little bit more on your toes, and it's almost hard for me to not feel like I'm running a half marathon, just because it puts me in a little bit more of an assertive position. And so I think the shape of the shoe's big. I think the foam is a big aspect, and then the carbon fiber plate kind of allows you to work with some of those things, kind of pieces it together. And I don't know that it's a big deal, but it needs to be in there for that other stuff to really to work well.
Sure. And you kind of mentioned this a little bit, just in that the shoe, the foam that Saucony is using is going to last a little bit longer. How is the Endorphin Pro kind of fit into your training cycle? Is it a shoe that you use regularly? Is it you still kind of save it for key workouts just to keep the foam nice and fresh? How does that fit in?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I feel like you know, these plated shoes came out and everyone jumped right into them, and I was a little hesitant. You know, the results on paper were enough to convince me I wanted to be racing in this shoe, but I've been running for 15 years of my life in shoes without plates in them. And so I'm not sure what this does to my posture, what this does to my foot. You know, so to go from running 0 miles per week in carbon fiber plated shoes to 100 miles a week in plated shoes seems a little irrational to me. So I'm trying to gradually increase it while staying healthy by continuing to train in what I'm used to. We still don't know the long-term biomechanical effects of running in a plated shoe. Certainly we're going to be using less foot muscles and probably less lower leg muscles, and I don't know if the development of those is going to be important or not going forward. And so I'm a little hesitant to jump all into all of my training. Now I want to be racing in this shoe, but I'm training in it maybe once a week, doing some sort of tempo, long intervals. You know, before the Olympic trials, I don't know that I had done any long run in the shoes. Now I've done long tempos, but like a 2 or 2.5 hour run in those shoes, I never did. And I think going forward, I want to do that for a couple of reasons. I think you recover a little bit quicker in these shoes, and I want to continue to introduce these shoes and get used to them. And so I think I would introduce them a little bit more than I did before Atlanta the next time. But I think one thing that Saucony is doing well in releasing the Pro is the addition of the speed and the shift shoes in this Endorphin line. That's something, you know, we're seeing tier 2, you know, we're seeing A racing shoes and B racing shoes from other companies. But Saucony put their A foam in this B type shoe. So the Speed still has the same foam, the same premium foam that's in the Pro. And that's impressive. No one's putting their top foam in tier B shoes. But I also think a huge thing, Saucony releasing this Shift that doesn't have a plate in it, is Saucony releasing a shoe that has the same shape technology as the Pro, but it's a trainer. So you can almost I view at least the Shift as the training shoe that prepares you to be able to race in the plated racing shoe. And I love that. So when I go out on a run in the Shift, I feel like my posture has changed, but I'm not running on a plate. And I think that that's probably good prep for getting into the plated shoes for faster workouts and for race days without actually having to put a lot of miles in those shoes. And so I look at this, this 3-shoe line as really an opportunity to buy a shoe that you can train in, to prep, to have you ready for that shoe that you're going to race in.
Yeah. And it's great. I mean, all the way around, it's great that you can have shoes you can use regularly within your training without worrying about stacking up too many miles on them.
Sure.
But to kind of go back to New York, obviously you have a special connection with that race. I love that you just threw on the shoes and like bombed the race. We have a lot of people training for New York in the fall. You seem to have kind of cracked that code a little bit. Can you give our Heartbreakers a little bit of coaching on how to prepare for and really succeed at the New York Marathon?
Yeah, well, I can try. I'm still, I still am figuring it out, but I do think I get a little closer each race. It's so different. When you compare Chicago to Boston to New York, they're very different. In Boston, you can get to the top of Heartbreak Hill, and if you have a little bit left, just a little bit, then it's all downhill to the finish. And if you have just enough to take advantage of that downhill, then you're okay at mile 21, feeling a little bit flat. Okay, we can't be all the way flat, but a little bit flat. And New York, it's just a different story. If you're at mile 21 and you're already hammered, you got 5 hard miles coming as you get along Central Park and you start hitting those hills, and then as you get into Central Park and you have some more hills, you have the uphill finish. New York is a race where you don't want to be out of gas by mile 18 or 19 or 20. Now, that's tough to quantify because in almost any marathon, you're feeling a little bit out of gas by mile 18, 19, or 20. But I think the key to New York is to be patient in those early miles, and take advantage of the very flat miles in Brooklyn. So it's tough because we're trying to be patient, but we also have some of the fastest miles of the race early on.
Sure.
And that's not unlike Boston either. But in New York, I say it's getting over the Verrazano Bridge, and then it's getting into Brooklyn and taking advantage of those miles while still being relaxed. And then it's not toasting yourself on some of the bridges that come in the center of the race, getting over the Queensboro Bridge. It's about not getting too excited when you drop onto First Avenue and your ears go deaf because of all the cheering, and just, using that energy, but not letting that energy encourage you to tap into adrenaline and everything else and go crazy. And then once you get into Harlem, you can start, you can start kind of pushing it back down towards the finish. And I think, I don't know, I think that's, to me, is taking advantage of the course while saving a little bit for those hills that are in the park there at the end.
Definitely got to respect that last 10K.
Oh, man.
You've had so many great races in your career. Is there one that you look back on as that is your kind of shining moment, the race you're most proud of?
That's interesting. When I think back on races, a lot of times for me, it's different races than everyone else sees, right? I think most, if you were asking, friends or family or even my coach, we'd probably say, yeah, 2016 Olympic trials were pretty big. The 2016 Olympics was big. Some of these major marathons was big. But I don't know, like one of my, one of the races I'm the most proud of is my first marathon in Chicago, and that was 7 years ago now, and I was a senior in college. I didn't have cross country eligibility, and so Coach Eystone decided that we were going to run a marathon before I came back to track season for my senior year, and I ran the Chicago Marathon, and it was tough. Like I remember feeling so good at mile 13 and feeling so bad at mile 18. And I just wasn't prepared for that. And the last 2 or 3 miles of the Chicago Marathon were my eyes going to tunnel vision, me not knowing like if I was just gonna fall over. When I hit the finish line, I remember like slowing down, and I couldn't see well, and I was taking a couple steps, and someone came up and said, "Hey, we need a wheelchair for this one," and I was like, "No, I don't need a wheelchair." And they're like, "Are you sure? The athlete tent's like a quarter mile away." And I was like, "Okay, bring me the wheelchair." And
Yeah, we're rolling.
oh man, and I remember like being wheeled over to the tent, and then I like got out of the wheelchair and sat in a chair, and they came and sat my backpack down next to me, and I remember thinking, I gotta get into my backpack and pull out my phone and call my wife because I might die. But like the thought of the energy that it would take to unzip my backpack and pull out my phone was too much. I felt like I can't do this. I can't do it. And I looked over at the table, and there were these little mini poppy seed muffins on the table, and I was like, oh, it looks so good. But like the thought of stretching out my hand and grabbing one was like it just like everything seemed like such a big deal. And I was just leveled. But I loved that I had just done something really hard. And I think that first marathon taught me something about myself. And I think that's why I keep going back to the marathon, is for an experience that just extends from that first experience of running the first marathon of, I want to show myself again that I can do something really hard. And I don't know, there was just something about that still gives me chills thinking back to that first marathon and thinking about how I did something that in the middle of the race I didn't know if I could do. We talked about the Olympics a little bit, and certainly the Olympics had an element of that where I was like, I don't know if I can do this, and then I did. But there's just, I think to me the races that mean the most are the ones where I really learned something about myself. And it's not necessarily the same races that I'm breaking the tape or that everyone else wants to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, no, and it's so fascinating talking to athletes, because I think, it's all like marginal gains, if you will. And it's like, I look back on this race and I learned this one little nugget that I can now apply to everything else going forward. But it's, I didn't realize that you ran Chicago when you were a senior in college. I did know that you kind of graduated and kind of went straight to the roads. You didn't really do a lot of like pro track stuff. Tell me a little bit about that transition. Do you not like the track? Do you just didn't really vibe with the track, or just have too much fun with the roads? You like suffering out in the sun? What is it about that?
Well, I do love the roads, and I love traveling to different cities and getting to tour the city in the race. And it seems that, that's the experience you get when you go to these marathons. They're showing off their city. And so you get to see the highlights of the city with all the streets closed off, just open to me and the other runners. And I love that. And so I do love road racing. I think I stepped up to it quick because that's where I had potential for success. Now, had I stayed on the track and continued to develop my speed, would my marathon ceiling be higher? Maybe. But I'm gambling the opportunity to even ever get to that ceiling. And so for me to stay on the track wouldn't have been financially advantageous. And I had 2 kids when I was graduating from college. My wife and I had been married for, I don't know, 4 years or so when I was graduating from college. And so we had a couple kids, and I needed to take care of my kids. But I just think, still wasn't necessarily a move about the money. It was just more that there was more for me on the roads. There was more opportunity, and I was somewhat clear that I was a marathoner, and it didn't make sense for me to just wait for what was going to be the best part of my career just because conventionally people say, hey, stay on the track a little bit longer. I don't know. And I think that being coached by Coach Eyestone played a role in that too. Coach Eyestone had a long career that he ran marathons and on the track through his whole career. He made the 88 and 92 Olympics in the marathon, but then in 96, he didn't make the Olympics in the marathon, and he came back on the track and was in second place with a couple of laps to go, but the trials were in Atlanta, and it was hot, and he passed out. And so I think that, like, he had a career, and he had world championships in between all of those, where he was going and running the 10K at Worlds. And so I feel like he didn't have this one or the other mentality when it came to road running and marathoning or track. And so he let me open the door to running on the roads, and I did run on the track a little bit early on, but it was just so clear that I was more competitive on the roads that eventually we were like, well, why are we running on the track?
Sure.
Maybe we should just focus on the roads.
Yeah. So we opened up some questions to our Heartbreakers. One of the most commonly requested questions was, how do you get that mustache so perfect?
I don't know. Let's just grow this way because I am not a professional shaver. So, no, this is just kind of raw. It's just how it grows, and it's
Love
me.
Love it. Naturally gifted athlete and a naturally gifted mustache grower. So we got some fun rapid fire questions for you. We'll go lightning round. So I'll give you two options. Pick your favorite one. We'll start with a softball just to get you warmed up. Coffee or tea?
Oh, I guess so. I don't drink coffee and I don't drink tea, but I drink herbal tea and I drink cocoa, which is like a chocolate bean version of coffee.
Okay.
And I would say between the cocoa or the other chocolate herbal teas, I would take the cocoa. So I guess I'm a coffee guy, but I don't drink coffee.
Fair. I'll take it. Mean or median?
Say that again.
Mean or median?
Oh, mean.
Okay.
That's a tough one.
We don't ask easy questions over here. As a famous Jared, do you have a favorite Jared Leto movie?
No.
No? How about Prefontaine, Dallas Buyers Club, or Suicide Squad?
Prefontaine.
Okay. No, that one's a little easy. Bayesian or frequentist?
Bayesian.
Okay.
I feel like that deserves an explanation, but we'll let you go Google it.
Yeah, I'm just happy that I pronounced the words correctly.
Yeah.
Model a change score or include baseline covariates?
Covariates.
This is when my statistics friends put me on blast.
Baseline covariates.
Okay. World majors or Olympics?
Man, I love the world majors. Olympics comes around once every 4 years. I guess I'm going to say Olympics, but it's almost like because that's what the media and friends and family demand. Like I love world majors.
Like you said, best tour of the cities.
That's right.
All right. In a race, let's say in a cross country race, BYU versus the world, who wins?
BYU. I got to go on record.
Love it. And then last question, this is just kind of my fun favorite question to ask. If you could take your talent level in running and apply it to any other professional sport to go pro, what would that sport be?
Dude, I was thinking about this on my run this morning because I've been asked about other Olympic sports, and I think like downhill skiing is pretty high on the list. I
Okay.
grew up in Utah. I love skiing and snowboarding. Um, but I also this morning I was thinking about how much I liked tennis, and that I want to get back out and play tennis. And if I could, tennis is an Olympic sport. I guess it's not thought of maybe as an Olympic sport, but maybe tennis
Counts. I like that. Generally nice weather too. So
Yeah,
it works. Awesome. Well, again, Jared, thank you for coming on with us today. Really great to talk to you. Just learn all of your insight on marathon racing. And you've just been such a great role model on the world running stage. And again, we appreciate you being generous with your time today.
Hey, appreciate you guys, man. And keep making nice hats.
We will. Mean it. Love it. I'm the hat guy, so can do. But awesome. Well, thanks again, Jared. We look forward to cheering you on. And definitely come run Chicago. It's my jam. We'll see you there. All right.
Okay,
Have a great one.